Welcome back to another video from Performance Line Bearings. What we're going to do in this video is have a look at the Bosch service kit, but we're not going to fit it into a CX motor like other people are doing. We're going to fit it into the earlier Performance Line motor. It's more likely that you're going to be trying to repair one of these than a CX motor at this time. So we have one here. As you'll notice, it's a different colour, but apart from that, that's about the only difference. There is a difference on a small pin inside the motor, but we'll have a look at that when we get to it. So, first thing we're going to do, obviously we don't want any contamination inside the motor at all. So, with a little soft brush, go around all the outside edges to remove any contaminant that's going to fall inside the motor. If you have a compressor to hand with compressed air, you can obviously blow all the bits of grit and dust off as well, which makes a much better job of it. So once we're happy that it's all clean and shiny, the next thing we're going to do is remove the circlip from the crankshaft. So with a pair of strong circlip pliers, we can just pop the circlip out. That will allow us to get the cover off in a minute. Next thing we've got to do is, in each of these T25 torque screws is a little blob of silicon sealant, and it makes it that you can't get your Torx driver in there. So with a small pick, if you put it into the head of the screw and then just wind it around, break up that silicon sealant, you'll find it will come out basically as a little black plug of sealant. And we do that for all 6 of those. Okay, so that's the last little plug of silicon. We've taken the 6 plugs of silicon out of the T25 screws, so now we're going to undo those, ready to take the cover off. We're now going to remove the cover, and the best way of doing this, and as in the Bosch instructions, we'll use a 2-legged puller. So we put the chainring nut back on, remembering it's left hand thread, and using a standard 2-legged puller, let the seal go, and we can just wind that off. And there we have our old cover off with the gears intact. Okay, one component that you don't get with the new kit is the freewheel gear, and you need to keep that for later on. We'll talk about that in a bit more detail. So all this lot now is redundant. It's all replaced by the new kit, which we'll have a look at. What we want to do first really is just to inspect inside the motor. This kit only does half the job. It only does the right hand side of the motor. What's going on with the rest of the bearings on the left hand side of the motor could be anything. So if you're replacing this, the chances are it's because you've got a noisy motor, and that's normally caused because the bearings have failed through water ingress. Now if you've got water in one side of the motor, there is a chance that you've also had water through the other side of the motor, and this will destroy the bearings. But while this is out, you can listen to the crankshaft, spin it, see what it feels like. Don't be alarmed about the rubbing noise. It's because this isn't located into the side of the cover, so you can basically move that transfer gear around so that you can listen to both the transfer gear bearings and the left hand crankshaft bearing. This should spin freely, feel nice and smooth and sound relatively quiet. We've got a couple of motors here that obviously show good examples of what you should be looking for. You can see this motor's had water through it, you can see rust on the gears, you can see rust on the crankshaft, and you can see rust on the end of these bearings. And when we spin this crankshaft, it doesn't sound very nice at all. Now, as far as Bosch goes, this would then be a throwaway motor, but all these bearings and components are available from us. We can overhaul the motor for you if you don't have the equipment to do it yourself. So it's not a problem. You don't have to throw your 600-700 pound motor in the bin. What we've got just behind the crankshaft is the left hand crankshaft bearing, and again, like I say, it's a relatively simple job to change this over. You've got the motor apart anyway. There are a few little bits and pieces that you have to be aware of, but please refer back to one of our other videos that show you a complete overhaul of this motor. The other component that we need to have a look at is this freewheel gear, and when we look inside it, we don't want to touch this surface, and we're keeping it as clean as possible. That's why I don't wear gloves. I can feel the grit on my fingers. If I was wearing gloves and I picked up some grit from the outside of the motor, for example, I wouldn't be able to know it's on there, and I'll be transferring that to the other components. Hence, don't diss me because I haven't got my gloves on. There is a bearing inside there, and also obviously we need to look at the condition of the shaft. In this case, it's come out of a pretty good motor. There's no problems there, and we're quite happy with that. We've got some examples here that have come out of obviously very abused motors where this bearing has rusted completely, and that will be doing damage to the crankshaft. The actual bearing surface on this part of the gear, again, is heavily pitted and would just ruin your new bearing. So that would be a write-off. You can contact us. Sometimes we have parts for these motors, second-hand parts, but they are limited. So you'd be lucky if you know, hopefully we can sort you out. There's another one there. The shaft looks fine, there's no problem with that, but again, the bearing is all rusty and starting to fail. These bearings you can buy from us, they're available, but you can't buy them from Bosch. As far as the left hand crankshaft bearing goes, again, if you don't think there's an issue, there's a few we've changed recently. They're all rusted up, in a hell of a state. The bearings are either seized solid or sound horrible, but they are replaceable. Okay, we're going to move on. Next shot we'll open up the box and see what we've got. Okay, so let's have a look at what we've got in the box. We've got a nice thick book of instructions. Don't panic, it's all in different languages, so the bit that pertains to the language you're speaking isn't too complicated. We've read that, so we'll just put that aside for a moment. We have a little bag with 6 new T25 Torx screws for the cover, a bearing bearing pin with rubber bush, and a small little rubber O-ring there, and that goes onto that renews the O-ring on the crankshaft. Underneath the plastic cover we have a new transfer gear, and a new cover with the other gears in it. Bosch have changed the grease now that goes into the around the main motor bearing, and it's a nice green goopy sticky grease that doesn't seem to wash out as quite as easy as the old stuff used to. So we've also in here have a tube of drive unit grease, and this is what we're going to use to lubricate the gears for the new drive unit when we put it back in. Okay, so the first thing we've got to do is clean this off, ready for refitting. And again, like it says in the instructions, this bearing surface shouldn't be touched by fingers. The easiest way is to jam your fingers inside it so that you can hold it, and then get your lint free cloth and just clean off any old and what is normally rusty grease. Okay. We'll cut back when we've cleaned out all the gears, because this takes some time to do it properly. So we've cleaned the freewheel gear up. If you had the luxury of an airline in your workshop, then that is the best way to do it, because there is no chance of getting any contamination in there. Everything is blown out, all the grit is gone, and it gives us a nice clean surface to apply our grease to. The grease is applied liberally. So it fills up between the teeth. And now we can refit that back into the cover or onto the motor, ready to go back. So now we do the same to the new white plastic gear. And we just again put that there just for safekeeping, so it doesn't pick up any contamination. Okay, what we're going to do is just remove the O-ring before we put the gears back in. And a little picky tool. Get that out of the way and discard it. So now, our nice grease gears that we put here for safekeeping, we can pop those back into the motor, ready for the cover to go on. Pop our new O-ring on. And a little smear of silicone to help that slide in and keep the moisture out. And put the cover on. So all we've got to do now, we'll put our circlip back on and put our 6 screws back in. got that cover back on, screws are back in. We've torqued them up in the correct order, which is again in the instructions: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And now we have our motor sounding like new again. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you've now seen how easy these kits are to fit. They are now available from our store, but if you'd like us to fit it, then please get in touch.